All right. Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to video one of my beginner to master Azul guide. Um, I go by Kryptonite on Board Game Arena, and I am currently an Azul Master. Um, and we'll pull up my rank evolution plot here. And you'll see that I started playing almost 3 years ago, I guess. And when I started playing, there were very little resources out there, very few resources out there for specifically learning competitive two-player Azul. And even 3 years later, that's still the case. Not much has changed. Um, so I wanted to do a video series to give back to the community. I love this game, and I love talking about Azul strategy. Maybe some of you have chatted with me before during games. And one thing that I want you to notice when you look at this plot is that it took me a long time to get to master. Um, Probably around 3,000 games, maybe 2.5 years. And along the way, you'll see that I would make some increases and then fall and then make increases and fall. And all of that was kind of learning things the hard way, where I would see something in a game I played or go review a game from another master and try to learn about what strategies they were using and then implement them myself and inevitably fail. um, but ultimately, over time, kind of developed what I think is the right set of strategies or a good set of strategies. Um, but all this to say, like, I am not some Azul wizard. This game did not come to me quickly. I'm not a natural. It took me a long time to get to where I'm at. And if you are someone who is stuck at the 400 level or the 300 level or the 500 level, um, maybe you've played thousands of games, um, you can still progress. And I think part of what's difficult is the lack of resources. And, there are certain things that maybe you just don't pick up yourself, but as soon as someone kind of talks to you through them, they make perfect sense. So the goal here is to um, kind of provide those strategies and tips to help you level up. Um, the way I was going to initially do this was to do a written guide. You can see that I started it here. And I did cover some macro strategy topics. But when I started getting into the micro strategy stuff, I realized it was just going to be way too hard to take a million screenshots, write this all down. So I'm abandoning the written guide for a video series instead. And the plan for this series is this is actually not my Kryptonite account. I'm on a new account, and I will basically start at 0 ELO and record every game up to hopefully master and talk through kind of the common mistakes at each ELO range, how to take advantage of them, so that no matter what level you're at, hopefully you will gain something um, from watching these videos. And another thing that I want to kind of stress is that I don't think Azul has to be a complicated game. I don't think you have to be able to see 6 moves ahead or do a bunch of if then calculations. So I'm going to stress kind of assessing each round at the beginning, developing a plan, and then working through that plan without the need for all of this deep calculation. Um, so before jumping into some first games, I do want to talk briefly about some macro strategy items. And the first is tile adjacency. And I think most players are familiar with this, of course, but obviously we want to play tiles next to each other. That's the way that you really rack up points. And specifically in kind of the round one section of the guide, which I never got to write, I was going to talk about kind of building from the middle. And that doesn't mean the exact middle. Any of the three middle columns are fine. But what we don't want to do is build from one of the sides. That makes it a little bit more difficult to continue our tile adjacency. And as with kind of everything we talk about in the guide or as we go through games, nothing is sacred. There are no hard and fast strategies. So while I am saying here that tile adjacency is important, there will be plenty of times throughout this series where I choose to not take adjacent tiles, and we'll talk about the trade-offs there when those come up. But building off of that, talking about basically investment and reward. And one thing I see a lot of beginner players do incorrectly is there is, for some reason, an appeal to the larger rows 4 and 5, where players want to fill those rows, probably because you need them for building columns, you need them for building color bonuses. But what often happens is you build a row 5 tile, you get a row 5 tile, that's worth 1 point. Whereas you can get a row 1 tile, that's worth 1 point. But one of them you had to invest 5 tiles in, and the other one you only had to invest 1. So you get more bang for your buck from the upper rows when it comes to scoring non-bonus points than you do from the lower rows. And I gave an example here in the guide, but if you imagine building 2 columns right next to each other, even with, so the investment is 30 tiles to do that. And even with the bonus points, the 14 bonus points, you end up with 53 points. And how else could you use 30 tiles? You can actually fill all 3 of the top rows with 30 tiles, and your points in that case would be 74. So you're getting 21 points more to ignore columns and just build the top 3 rows, utilizing adjacency bonuses and the fact that you're putting more tiles on the board for the same number of tiles that you're investing. And that's going to lead us into kind of a baseline strategy. So we're going to ignore some math, and you're just going to have to trust me a little bit, but ideally, or what you should have in mind going into a game, is that you want to complete the top 2 rows and just 1 column. And that kind of turns out to be the right mix of investment and reward. So you're getting the low cost investments of the top 2 rows, but of course you have to use tiles elsewhere. So you're going to use those other tiles to build 1 column. And it kind of is anticlimactic maybe. You want to build multiple columns, you want to get color bonuses, 7 points, 10 points. But the truth is that it's actually pretty hard to get those additional bonuses without giving up significant points from just placing your tiles, or your opponent is going to be able to defend those things quite easily, and make you either take negatives or put you in a bad situation. So 2 rows, 1 column, that's kind of the baseline strategy that we're going to go with. And to illustrate this point further, I pulled the playing stats for Sapperlot, who is in my opinion, the undeniable GOAT of Azul. And if you look at his bonus points, so his points gained with complete lines, 2.79. So he's actually completing over one row per game, but not 2 rows. So he's averaging between 1 and 2 rows per game completed. And then points gained with complete columns, just over 7. So he does complete a second column every now and then, but that works out to be like once every 14 or 15 games. And then similarly, points gained with complete color, 0.64. So he's almost never getting a color bonus. So this just kind of reiterates that you don't need to be completely filling your board with columns and color bonuses to win in Azul. Now, I will note that at the higher levels, the game tends to be more defensive, and Saprolot himself plays a slightly more defensive style, so you shouldn't necessarily aim for these exact stats, but it kind of gives you a compass of, or an idea that you don't need to be going crazy for bonuses. Okay, so moving on, this is more of a round one thing, but I'm going to talk about investment again, but not in the sense of reward, but in the sense of how many tiles you need to accomplish what you want. So this is the end of round one in a recent game that I played. And I think for some of you looking at this, this might cause some anxiety. And if it does, it's probably because of this single black tile in row 5. And when I first started playing Azul, I would never play this tile as my last pick because I wanted the flexibility to put something different in row 5 just in case like a bunch of yellow came or a bunch of red came. But the reality is, like we talked about in the last section, we want to build one column. So picking rows that align in the first round, that is to say the color in row 4 aligns with the color in row 5, is pretty critical. And if I'm going to do that, so if I'm saying I'm going to build this center column in this case, then I'm going to need 5 black tiles. So even though I might lose some flexibility or get myself in a sticky situation, this tile is something that I'm going to need eventually. So why not play it now? And in addition to needing these 5 black tiles for my column, I'm also going to want the 2 black tiles for my row 2 and the 1 black tile for my row 1. So I need 8 black tiles. My opponent, depending on what they're building, is going to need at least 3. So we're up to 11. Tiles get thrown out. So the point is, like, every tile counts. And while this is kind of scary or can be scary to look at, learning to do this and to kind of work around the drawbacks of this is going to improve your kind of micro strategies of how you handle tiles within a round. And it's actually going to benefit you more in the long run. So we are going to be building like this. And actually, we're going to be putting a pretty heavy focus on rows 4 and 5 in round 1, more so than you may think. I have seen advice on the forums to focus on the top 3 rows in every round. I think that's like decent advice for beginners, but ultimately that will hold you back in the long run. So we're going to talk about how to build in round 1 to kind of maximize your long-term gain for the rest of the game. The only section that I ended up writing in the micro strategy section is about the first player tile. I think this is another topic that gets kind of a lot of attention. People think it's really important, or maybe it's not that important. I've seen the idea that you should intentionally let your opponent take the first player tile in round 3, so that they start round 4, which means that you can take the first player tile going into round 5. And yes, having the first player tile in round 5 is particularly strong, but using a strategy like this, if you're not flexible with it, you might be hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself, because you're probably giving up something to let your opponent take it in round 3, or you're giving up something to take it in round 4. So what we're going to do instead is assess the specific situation we're in and use that to dictate whether we take the first player tile. And I have an example here from a game of mine, and this is round 3. So this is where, in theory, maybe I should let my opponent take the first player tile. But what do we notice in this round? And it's actually, maybe it's not that subtle, but my opponent has 1 black tile on row 4, and this round has no black tiles. So what that means for the next round, one, I mean, I knew the tile counts in this case, but most likely we should expect more black tiles. And basically, I want to be able to control the black tiles next round. This singular black tile on row 4 is really hurting my opponent. They want to build row 4 blue to complete this column. So obviously they're not going to get it this round. And if I can prevent them from getting it next round also, then this is like a near guaranteed win for me. Will have no way of building a column. So in this case, I really want the first player tile because I want to control black next round. Now, the question is, what am I giving up to get it? And if you look at this board, I have a lot of flexibility in this round. So I do want these 2 whites for my row 4, but honestly, it's not the end of the world if I don't get them. That being said, it shouldn't be a problem. My opponent doesn't have any good places to play white. All they have is this row 2, which is really not good for them from an adjacency perspective. So I should feel pretty good about being able to get these 2 whites. And then for my row 2 adjacency, I can either take 2 whites or 2 reds. There's plenty of reds, so I can probably make that happen. And then for my row 1, white or yellow to maintain adjacency. And in this case, taking the first player tile, I will take this yellow, so I'm not giving that up. It's actually something I'm gaining. And then additionally, I don't have anything to worry about with negatives. The most common tile is yellow. I can play those on row 5. I can play those on row 3. So I'm going to be good there. So basically, like, because my board is so flexible with this draw, I can take this first player tile. I'm not giving anything up, and I'm gaining the advantage of having control of the black tiles next round. So just to show you how that played out, I did in fact finish my row 4 white, get the row 3 yellow, get row 2 blue, and with this round 4 draw, I'm going to take these 2 black on my row 2, and my opponent is in big trouble. So okay, that was the extent of the guide. I can provide this link if people are interested in reading it. But I think what we will do now is jump into a couple of games. And I do know that this is a little bit unfair in that the people I'm playing with are unknowingly playing against a master and will lose some ELO, presumably. But I think ultimately, hopefully this video series is a good thing for the community. And in a way, these people will kind of get free coaching lessons. They'll be able to come watch these videos, and I'll be pointing out kind of the mistakes that they've made. And at the end, when it's all said and done, I'm happy to play a game in which I try really hard, but ultimately lose to anyone who was in this video series, so they can regain the ELO. So what we're going to do is create a 2-player game, and we are going to start with, I guess, beginners and apprentices. And the idea here is we're only going to play within the range that we're in, so that we're learning about the players at that level. So let's see. We want fast scoring. And we will open this game to other players. And hopefully this doesn't take too long. I suppose I can also look for a game. Okay, so we've got one. Zoom out here. And one thing I do want to point out, if folks don't know this, the 4-second confirm button, you can disable that. So you don't have to make your decision within 4 seconds. Okay. So my opponent takes 2 red here. Let's first look at the tile counts. I like to just use the first row as the order in which I think of tiles. So we have 5 blue, 1 yellow, 6 red, 4 black, and 4 white. So in round 1, I don't actually worry about which of the top rows I get too much. I do want to make sure I get the first and second row, but I'm more so thinking about what bottom rows are going to be plentiful. So in this case, really any of these 3 middle columns have good bottom rows. The rows 4 and 5, that is. So, and my opponent's already chosen basically column 2. I could contest them on it, but I don't love that. And if they take 2 blue for theirs, I still have the opportunity for 3 blue. So I'm actually going to go and start here by building the middle column. And like I said in the macro guide section, we're actually going to focus a little bit more on the bottom rows in round 1. More so than you would think. I think most people tend to think, you kind of focus on the top rows. So if we take 1 red and our opponent takes the other red, then we will get 3 blue, right? Now, if we take 1 red and they don't take 1 red, maybe they take the 2 blue, then this trap doesn't work. But this trap isn't going to hurt us too bad. The one thing we want to be aware of is actually like what we're going to put in our second row. Because if we do this trap and we take 2 blue, or rather if we do this trap and they don't fall for it, and they take 2 blue, then we're probably taking 2 blue for our second row, giving them 4 black, so that would be pretty terrible. So I'm actually going to just take 2 blue for my second row, and we'll see what they do. Okay, so they take a red, and again, like I said, going to be focusing on the bottom rows. And the reason that we're going to do this is it's easier to fill your top rows in subsequent rounds, and it's easier to defend against people's bottom rows since they need more tiles generally. So we're going to take these 3 black here, and again, we're thinking about investment in our entire game, our entire future board, right? So this is a good investment for our future. So nothing really that interesting here. I'm going to take this 1 white. We'll see if my opponent decides to block us. If I were my opponent, that's a fine play. I probably would have taken the 1 white and played it on row 3. Now, again, this is the same investment concept that I talked about, right? A lot of people would be uncomfortable putting a single tile on row 3 because it means you're less flexible for the next round. But you're going to need that tile. It's probably what you're going to try to build next round anyway. So, so why not play it now? And it had the added bonus in this case of blocking me from getting my row 3. Okay, so I am, let's see, we had 5 blue and so I'm going to take this red. Part of the reason I'm going to take the red over the blue, you might say they're both like equal adjacency, but the red is in the center, so it gives us opportunities for black or yellow for adjacent next round. Additionally, there weren't a lot of yellow in this round, and we're going to create this structure where we might be able to get 4 points for this yellow and 4 points for row 2 yellow in the next round. Okay, so as always, we'll start by assessing the board. So 2 blue, not going to have much of an impact this round. My opponent can use it for adjacency on their row 1, but mostly going to be a non-factor. 5 yellow, that puts us to I think 15 yellow. I'm sorry, 14 yellow, 6 yellows total. So 14 yellows remaining. And those are going to come into play for us for sure. But I'm probably not going to rush into the yellows because these blacks are looking quite nice to finish my row 5 and block my opponent's row 4. The 5 reds, probably not going to be much of a factor. And the 4 whites we will see. Obviously, they want the row 3 whites. So we'll see if we have an opportunity to block them. Just to recap some tile counts. Okay, so this is interesting. So they take one white, which is a fine play. I'm going to take advantage of grabbing the first player tile and filling my optimal row 2. So one thing I'm looking at here right away is my opponent wants 1 more white for row 3, which would leave 1 white left. And white is one of their row 2 adjacencies. The other is yellow. So I can actually take 2 yellow here for my top row. And this guarantees that they either don't get an adjacent second row or they don't complete this 3rd row. So one thing I want to emphasize throughout the series is there's more than one way to defend in Azul. I think most people, when they think of defending, they think of taking the tiles that your opponent wants. But sometimes it's creating a large clustered group of the tile they want, or in a way I just took the yellows that they wanted, but it was predicated on kind of putting them in this situation where they had to choose between row 2 white and row 3 white. So, okay. So we're at the point in the round where we can start thinking about the tile order at the end of the round. And this is a very critical thing, especially if you are going to be doing things like placing 1 tile in your row 5 during row 1. You don't want to get stuck with these big negatives. So looking here, we're not really in any danger. Reds are the most dangerous tile, but we have row 4 open, so we can play them there. We also have row 3 red, which wouldn't be terrible. So I think I'm going to play a defensive move here and take these 2 black. And again, we have the first player tile. So this doesn't have to be that scary because we'll have control of black next round. Additionally, we have already basically completed our goal with row 4 of getting this column set up. So, this is really nice for us because it's adjacent. We might get a chance to kind of build out part of this second column. But one of the benefits of completing a row 4 or a row 5 in round 1 is that you can be more aggressive defensively. So we'll see how this plays out. If I were my opponent, take 2 reds here. Now, I have some of you might want to take 3 reds, which isn't a bad play, but I do need to eventually get this row 3 blue. Looking at how many blues have been played, this is 2, 4, 6, and I don't think there was a negative in round 1. I think it was a red negative in round 1. So there are plenty of blues, and thinking about the long-term investment again, because I have row 2 blue, I only really need 4 more blues. So I can afford to take these reds. They're a little far from where I'm building, so unclear how helpful they'll be from an adjacency perspective. This isn't a super easy choice. The benefit of taking 2 blue is that my opponent's kind of left with 3 red up here, so they'll take some negatives. They'll take a negative from the blue also if I do that, but let's just go with the blue. Part of this will be kind of instructional in terms of playing with open rows. So hopefully, no, maybe not hopefully because we want to win the game, but maybe we get a tricky draw and we get to discuss a little bit about how to play with open rows. Okay, so they take the 1 white, which is okay. I think probably taking the reds was better to maintain adjacency because you're going to have to take them for negatives anyway. So, and the white, I can't play anything, so it didn't matter for me. So they could have had adjacency and 3 negatives. Instead, they have this kind of awkward situation, especially awkward because they need black here, and now they've created a situation where they want black up here as well. So, okay, let's look at our tiles. 3 blue, that is fine for us. We need 1 here, maybe 1 up here. The 5 yellow, we're not going to have much opportunity to do with, but this is going to be a good example of defending. So I probably don't want to, if I end up with yellows on the bottom row, it's not the end of the world. But really what I want to do is make him pay for, or them, shouldn't say him, make them pay for this row 2 yellow. So we'll see if we can bear that out. 5 black, obviously that's going to be a focus this round. 3 red, and I realized I went out of order there. 3 red, hopefully we can grab this row 2 red, but we're pretty flexible with the row 2 white as well. So I'm going to start with kind of an obvious move here and take 2 black, but what did I say about the yellows? We want to group them in the middle. So I'm going to take this black instead of this one so that we can create this potential yellow grouping for later. Another benefit of the black that I chose is that it doesn't put a blue in the middle. So if all these blues group up, then I either have to, I'm going to have to pay extra for my row 3, and I think we might see that actually play out here. I am going to take this black to defend, and again, because my board is flexible, I'm not too worried about the potential for negatives here. If I have to end up taking 4 white for my row 2 or something like that, it's not the end of the world. My opponent says I play dirty. This is simply the nature of two-player Azul. I actually wrote a section in the guide on this. You know, we play to win, not to make friends, and we're not worried about whether people have a problem with that. So obviously, I want this one blue. What I want to be mindful of is creating a bad situation around my row 2. So if I take this, I'll put, this is actually another instructional moment. So if you can put 4 colors in the middle and the remaining factory has 3 of those 4 colors, you cannot get stuck with the last pick, or at least you will have the choice. So when I take this blue, there's nothing my opponent can do here to make it so that I have the last pick. If they take red, there's 4 left. If they take white, there's 4 left. If they take yellow, there's 4 left. If they take anything from the middle, I will have the option to play from the factory and give them the last pick. So so this is kind of a rule of thumb to remember. If you can create a group of 4 colors in the middle where the remaining factory has 3 of those colors, then you will be safe from getting stuck with anything. So they take 1 yellow, and they're not going to like what I'm going to do here, but of course I'm going to take this yellow, which will ensure that they get stuck with the last pick. I will have my choice between 2 white or 2 red, so I'm not worried about filling my second row. I am going to pay a little bit extra for it, but that's the cost of business. Yeah, and they're really not happy. Yeah, I'm going to take the red, maintain the flexibility of being able to build on either side. One thing I should say, actually, so I cover this in the hot topics section, which is tile tracking. At the higher levels of play, it is a common practice, which is to keep track of exactly what tiles have been played, so that you know what remains. There are players who don't do it, but it's fairly common, and I very much understand that some people would view that as cheating, because in real life you wouldn't just have a notepad and do that. But it is a reality, and it's something that I do at the high level. I'm not doing it here since we're playing at a lower level, but and so I'm a little out of practice of just keeping track of tile counts. But one of the factors that would have gone into that red-white decision from the last round would have been the tile counts, and I should have been more on top of that. Okay, so going into this round, so with blues, we have a nice opportunity to build our row 4 blue and the row 3 yellow. And we can see that because our opponent is so clogged up at the bottom. Sure, they're going to be able to get a couple yellow, maybe 2, maybe 1, but we should have row 3 basically for free. And they can't play any blues, so we will have row 4 blue basically for free. So that's a great situation for us. Now, knowing that we're going to take row 3 yellow, we can discount row 3 red and row 3 white. So the play that comes to mind here is to, one, take this white to block their row 5, or not block, but make them pay extra for it. And two, it groups these reds together so that they are going to have a hard time playing this this top row red. And there's a chance that I will even take this single black tile at a later point in the round to force them to have to take these reds for their top row. Excuse me. Okay, so yeah, nothing. We already kind of laid out the plan. The plan's gonna work. One thing we want to do is just grab our row 2, which at this point has to be white. I neglected to mention that at the start of the round, but with 2 factories having the 2 white, this was not a concern. Didn't need to rush into that when I would have my options. Okay, so again, plan here is to take this 1 black. They will take the 3 red, and we'll probably take the 3 blue, resulting in them either taking 2 blue and giving us the 4 yellow for row 3, or taking the yellow, and then we'll be able to complete the row 4. And I guess I am, doing some calculations a couple moves ahead, but I hope that it is not feeling like you have to be looking really far ahead to see these plays. Most of it is identifying what my opponent wants or needs, what I want or need, and where I have flexibility, and knowing that the later parts of the round will kind of pan out. So, okay, so like I said, we're going to take the 3 blue. And you might be saying, oh, you could play this on row 5, and then if they take 2 blue, you get the 4 white, and you might be able to build a second column. But interesting. Okay, yeah. So we'll honestly, like with the 21-7 lead, this play doesn't matter too much right now. And they're going to go -14. So one thing that does come up, and if I had tile counts, or if I was paying better attention or wanted to do this math right now, I would kind of, maybe look into that. But one thing to think about when you have a big lead is that the way for you to lose is to end up in this situation where you're taking -14. So with that in mind, it's good to just close out this row. We'll go into the next round with a super clean slate, and it will be extremely unlikely that our opponent will be able to dump big negatives on us, which basically guarantees us the win. So when you have the lead, you should be particularly, or a big lead at least, you should be particularly careful with taking negatives, because that's probably the only way you're going to lose. So this round, we're not going to be looking to do anything fancy. We're going to secure our 2 black here. And like I said, because we have everything open, we don't have a lot to worry about. We can play these yellows, we can play these blues, we can play these whites, we can play these reds. So nothing to fear here. So we're just going to take our points and hopefully secure this win. Okay, so our opponent is threatening a second column. With our lead, we don't need to be worried about that. One thing we can do that's beneficial to us, if we take this blue, we'll create the 3 white in the middle and 3 yellow in the middle. So we'll basically guarantee ourselves one of these row 3s. So we'll go ahead and do that. This also, if my opponent wants to take row 2 white, now they're paying extra for it. We'll see if that comes to fruition. And if they do something to group these 2 blues together to threaten this second column, we can. Okay, so they're just going to take the blue. So we are, of course, going to take this blue. Now, if this were a tighter game, I would want to think about this a little bit more. I think a lot of people would just automatically dump this on the in the trash row, but I can actually play it on row 5, and because I have flexibility in my row 3 and row 4, there's no way for my opponent to stick me with anything big. So let's see what's optimal here. They want 2 black. If I take the 3 white, they'll take 2 black. I'll take 3 red. I mean, we could spend more time on this calculation, but that play was probably not optimal. But and they make a suboptimal play, but leaves me with 2, and that's the end of the game. So had this been a closer game, we would have spent a little more time on the round 5 strategy, but given the lead, it's safe to just take points. Okay, so we've gained our first Azul victory, up to 30 ELO. And let's do lots of trophies. Let's do one more before the end of the video. Let's see. Maybe I will also open this up to average players just to help get. So 195 is maybe a bit higher than I wanted in this case, but we will play it. So you'll have to excuse the hiccups early in the series. And Board Game Arena seems stuck. Let's refresh. Okay. So 4 blue, 4 yellow, 3 red, 4 black, and 5 white. Talking about round 1 a little bit more, my round 1 philosophy is that you can't win the game in round 1. No play you make is going to be so spectacular that you win, but I do think you can lose the game in round 1. And the main culprit of that is having a mismatched row 4 and row 5. So when you play, let's say 2 blue on row 4 and 2 red on row 5, that is a recipe for disaster. It's going to be very hard to make a column. Your opponent's going to be able to quite easily defend it. So that's the number one thing to avoid, in my opinion. Okay, and we're off. So I do like having the first player tile in round two because it gives you an opportunity to defend your opponent's row four and row five. And again, when I look at this board, we're going to have a lot of options for row four and five. So I'm actually just going to take the one red for my top column. It's nice and centralized. We secure the first player token in round two. We'll get to respond to what our opponent does here, and we'll kind of build accordingly. Okay, so this is an interesting move. One thing I'm seeing right away, it's okay. So if I take 2 white for my row 4, and then they take 1 white to finish their row 3, I can get this row 5 black, which will be good for my column and really hurt their column. So let's go for it. Now so you heard me say and the difficulty is if they make this play, right? So now I have to kind of choose between which I want to give them. And one way you can think about this is the tile investment again, right? So taking this white, I'm investing 1 tile. Getting this black, I'm investing 2 tiles. So in that sense, black is kind of better than white, so to speak. And either way, my opponent's going to fill a row. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then the nice thing in addition is, so obviously this 3 blue is great for us, but the one thing we want to make sure is that we can also still fill our second row. So the good news is our opponent can't stop us, because once we play this 3 blue, if they take 2 yellow, we get 2 red. And if they take a red, then we get 2 yellow. So we're guaranteed a row 2, so we can safely play this row 3 blue. And some of you might be saying like, wow, this worked out so well. But hopefully you see that I didn't like actively plan all of these moves ahead. I planned maybe 1 move ahead or 2 moves ahead, and it's going to work out great for us. But, you know, I started with a flexible move. I took some investments in my bottom rows and, you know, was able to like force my opponent in some ways. They you know, chose white over black or black over white. But there was nothing special there from a calculation perspective. So, okay. So 3 blue here. We had what? 3 blue last round. So that's 6 blue total. We're at 14 blue, 3 yellow here, and the 3 yellow from last round. So 14 yellow. 6 red on top of 3 red. So that's 9 red total for 11 red left. We have 5 blacks on top of 4 blacks, 11 black left, and 3 white from 5 white for 12 white left. Now, something like 2 yellow is attractive here for my row 2, but notice that my opponent doesn't have a great place to play yellow. So I'm not too worried about getting blocked there. These 2 black are also tempting to kind of prevent my opponent here. One thing I want to keep in mind is potentially trying to block my opponent from row 5 red. So, and then I'm not too worried about picking up these white along the way. My opponent doesn't have a good place to play white. So let's start with these blacks, and we'll go from there. Okay, so 2 blue. This gives us 2 white, which is great. So we're going to take those. And another thing I want to emphasize. So I think a pretty common, actually intermediate level mistake is playing too defensively. So I think there are players who would have instantly just jumped on these reds and played them on row 3. But remember that you are always looking for point differentials. And, in this case, like if my opponent builds 2 blue, they're black, and they're reds, I'm going to build the same thing with yellows, whites, and blacks. So it's sure I could spend a lot of energy defending these reds, but I'm not going to be in a worse situation than my opponent at the end of this. And if we play it well, we might be in a better situation. Now, one opportunity to play it well is right here. So this is, remember when I said you don't have to take tiles to defend? This is going to be a little bit subtle, but if I take these 2 yellows for my row 2, I will create 2 reds, which means that if my opponent wants to fill their row 5, they're going to have to take this 2 red and this 2 red. So they're going to pay extra there. Now, the other thing, it is going to create this 2 black, which will give my opponent the 4th row. But I'm not too worried about that. And I think I'll have an opportunity to take this 1 blue later, which means that my opponent would have to take red for their row 1, which we are going to try to combine. So if they take this 2 black here, then we're going to take this 1 blue to create the 4 red. Okay, so they don't, so they go for that. Oh. Okay, so we're going to take this 1 blue. Now, in taking the 1 blue, you'll notice that I might be giving up the opportunity to finish my row 5. But that's not a big deal for me. I'm going to finish it eventually. Getting it 1 round early is not a huge detriment because, as we've talked about, it's unlikely that we're going to build a second column anyway. So we're going to make this defensive play, and we can either take yellow or black for our top row adjacency. But this is going to hurt my opponent quite a bit. So they're going to make that play. And actually, I can make this black play on row 5 and still get my row 1 with white or yellow. So let's do that. And my opponent has to take the white, actually, if they want to complete their row 1. So we're going to get the yellow anyway. So did we come out ahead? We took 1 more negative, but we have a better adjacency setup than our opponent does. Okay, so let's take a look. We have 7 blue, and I believe we were at 14, so that leaves us at 7. We have 4 yellow. I believe we were at 14, so that leaves us at 10. 2 red. I think we were at 11 red, so that leaves us at 9. 1 black. I think were we at 11 black also? Puts us at 10. 6 whites. Okay, so our opponent's going to want this 3 blue. It's really good for them. And defending it, like if we play it on row 2, that's not great. Though they can, there's 4 other blues for them. Playing it on row 4 is kind of attractive. because we might get this 3 yellow and be able to start building here. But, if they take 2 blue and put it on row 2, then we're taking a blue, then they're taking a blue. We might miss our row 2 adjacency because there's only one black, so blue is it for adjacency. Now, that would dump a lot of white in the middle, and we would just probably be able to build this second column. So this is an opportunity where we could pivot to a second column. And I kind of like it, actually, and we can kind of experiment with doing this. So let's see if they take the 2. I don't know that I would have made this play in a normal game, to be honest. It's a little risky, and it's going to create kind of a big mess in the middle. Okay, they're thinking about it. And honestly, I think I should be giving better examples of when to go for 2 columns. I don't think it's entirely necessary here. We probably could have gotten away this round with a different approach. So, okay, so now they're taking a very interesting approach of 2 white. And this is a little bit of what I talked about in the macro section when I was reviewing the guide, which is that this investment is probably going to turn out to be very poor. So they're going to invest 5 tiles in this white tile. I would bet by the end of the game they don't complete this column, and those 5 tiles are going to score them 1 point. So we're going to go ahead and take the 2 blue here for our row 2. The other thing that taking this white does is it reduces the chance that they'll get their row 2 white, since they're going to be investing here. So if at some point we can take 1 red, then they won't be able to get an adjacent row 2. Alternatively, if we end up with both of these blues, well, they can play black for the row 1 adjacency. So we're going to see how this goes. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up with the 3 yellow here, in which case it gives us an opportunity to build row 3 white. So you can see the benefits of building from the center. We have a lot of flexibility in this round. Okay. So, yep, as discussed, we're going to grab these 2 whites. They take 1 red. So choice of what to take here. Now, because I want to have flexibility in my top row for blue or black, if I take the white, it gives my opponent the opportunity to lump these blues together. So I'm going to take the blue first. And now I'll be able to hopefully so they potentially should have lumped those whites together by taking the blue or the black, and then it would have been hard for me to take the whites because they could then take the other blue or black and leave my row 1 empty. So had they just taken 1 blue and put it on the floor, I probably would have taken the black and left them with these two whites anyway. As it stands, I get to take this white and maintain the flexibility between the blue and the black for my row one. And if that, I realize I kind of talked about that after the fact, so feel free to rewind 15 seconds or so to look at that scenario again. But my opponent had the opportunity to take away one of my two options for the top row, and basically put me in a situation where I couldn't complete this white row without giving up my first row. So you can already see the downside of my opponent choosing to invest in these row 5 whites. They're going to end up scoring very few points this round. They're going to be stuck with an incomplete row 5 next round. And the likelihood of them being able to build this column is pretty slim. And in fact, we'll see the scores at the end of this round, but I might be up by, more than 7, to the point where building that column is of minimal impact anyway, right? Like, they gave up so many points in this round that even if they get the second column, they're still going to be behind. Yeah, so they're down by 10, which is a big deficit. Okay, 3 blue, 3 yellow, 6 reds, 4 blacks, and 4 whites. We have the slightly unfortunate situation of needing this one black for adjacency, and all the other blacks are grouped on one factory. So that's not great. We will try to get these 3 yellows in the center. That will be good for us. Presumably our opponent will try to get their 4 blues, their row 4 blues, which will mean that they have nowhere to put yellows. Alternatively, we have the flexibility of potentially getting the 3 blacks for row 3 as well. We may choose to play them on row 1. One thing to be aware of is how many whites are left, because if we take the row 1 black and then the row 2 black, then we're going to need 3 whites. So I'm going to start with this row 1 black, but I am going to count up the whites in the meantime. And again, I want to emphasize, like, there's a lot of tile groups here. I think a lot of players are tempted when they see boards like this, like, oh, maybe, I go for this column, I can build this red and black row 4 and 5. But the reality is, like, our opponent's going to grab some reds. Most likely, they might grab the row 3 black. So sometimes it's best to just keep it simple. And especially since we have a 10-point lead, we don't need to be, investing tiles in these lower rows when we have a lot of flexibility this round. It might turn out to be the case that we do that, but we're not going to start off with that plan. Okay, so let's count some whites real quick. So there's 4 this round, 3 is 7, 3 is 10, 1 is 11, and 7 is 18. So there's only 2 whites at most left. So I do really want those 2 whites. Additionally, I like having the first player token in the last round. So this is kind of a no-brainer. I'm not worried about my opponent getting this row 3 blue. That's fine. They can have it. It actually is going to hurt them a little bit because they won't be able to play this row 1 blue. And then they would have to take the 3 blacks for row 1, which I could block. But because, oh, okay, they conceded. um, because they um, because they passed on this blue, I was going to take this and just dump it. Again, lots of flexibility in this round. Um, so taking that one blue, no problem. We're not giving much up. So, okay, those are the two games for today. Hope you enjoyed them. Please leave comments, questions if you like the format, if you don't like the format. The idea from here will be to just play games and talk through them like we did today. And we won't do any of the guide stuff next time. So hopefully just 3 games, maybe review some interesting spots if they come up. So yeah, thanks for watching.